And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Let me tell you about Lynn Monet, is the author of the Omnipresent series, Omnipresent and Omnipresent What Happened Next, as well as The Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. She is a paranormal consultant and lecturer specializing in hauntings, dying, the afterlife. Lynn has the ability to see frequencies of interdimensionality. Most cannot. She has been a nurse for more than 30 years, most of which have been in the end-of-life care, geriatrics, and management areas. She is on the board of directors for the soon-to-be-released Health and Recovery magazine this year and also holds a degree in biological science. Lynn, welcome back. How have you been?
Oh, George, it's great to be here. I've been looking so forward to this. I've been doing great. By chance, are you going to be doing any engagements in Asheville, North Carolina this year?
Not this year, which is almost up, but we did a couple of years ago. We had a live show. Do you live out that way?
I was there.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, I was. I was in the third row, very in the front. I was so tickled. I wanted tickets in the front row seat, but I was there and got to hear you sing, which was amazing. And if anybody has not heard George sing, you need to hear George sing because he can definitely belt out those notes.
I had a great time. Asheville's a great market for us.
Yeah, I had a great time too. It was wonderful. Very great show.
How did you get interested in the paranormal?
You know, I've had these abilities ever since I was a little girl. I didn't really know what they were. Of course, at the time, I've had some very profound things happen throughout my life. Mostly, the most vivid time that I can remember when I was about 5 years old, that an event happened with my brother in my parents' house. We were in the master bedroom, and there was some ectoplasm forming in the corner, and I had been dolling myself up out of my mother's jewelry box, and I had turned to show my brother how glamorous I looked and noticed that he had stopped playing with his cards. He was like fixated on this ectoplasm in the corner where his best friend, mother, father, and brother stepped into the ectoplasm. They were just like standing there smiling at us. So we both ran out to get my mother, and of course he found her first. And when they came back, there was nothing there. But it turned out that my brother's best friend and entire family had perished that day in an auto accident.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and we had found that out when my brother returned to school the next day because it was on a Sunday, and he went to school on Monday, and come to find out the teacher made the announcement that his friend John would not be returning to school because he and his entire family perished in an auto accident coming back from activities in Disney for spring break. So that's kind of how it started. I was always seeing things. When I was about 10, my mother took a jaunt with a different religion, and this religion did not believe in those sorts of things. So I was brought up in front of the elders and ridiculed for my gifts, told that I was possessed, that there was something wrong with me. And I actually became frightened of my gifts to the point where I was still seeing things, but I would get up and run out of the room just as fast as anybody else, thinking, oh my gosh, there's a ghost in the room. So when as I got older, I continued to ignore things, and then the first house that I wrote my book about, called Omnipresent, was a story about a house that was so badly haunted that I never was able to move in. And that put me into a position where I was in touch with people of like mind, and that helped me to realize that there were other people like me and that there was nothing wrong with me. And that at that point, then I started to nurture my gifts, and that's kind of how it all started.
So in addition to being a paranormal expert, you're also an empath. You've got this ability to feel what other people are experiencing, don't you?
I do, and also being able to see things and touch in with the other side. I've had so many, I don't know if even an expert. I don't know if anybody could even consider themselves really like an expert, because you're always learning new things. I've had some curveballs sent my way recently that were very, very interesting, that totally did not expect out of the blue. But again, it's a learning curve. We're all learning. We're learning from each other, and each situation is different.
It sure is. It sure is. And the most recent book you have that I have is called Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Colors of Heaven actually is out. It's a beautiful story. I wanted, as there's a dark side to paranormal, there's also this beautiful white side to paranormal.
Of course,
that really doesn't get talked about very much, which is about angels and things. And I've been in end-of-life care for 17 years out of the many, many years that I have been a nurse. And I've seen some very beautiful things at the time of death that people overlook many times because they're in their deep, deep grief. And I wanted to write this book to help take the stigma of death and dying away, to help people look at it in a different way. There is a beauty to that time, and a lot of times too, there's an opportunity and a window for people to communicate with the other side through the person that's transitioning that they miss out on, that they could actually touch in with relatives that have already crossed.
Interesting take on all of that. You have lived in haunted houses. How many?
Oh my goodness. Well, of course, I was born and raised in the first one, and I lived there, throughout the time that I finally moved and went off to college. Then I purchased the one that I wrote the book about that has started the Omnipresent series, of which will end up being 5 books. I'm just ready to release the 3rd book, which is called Omnipresent 111 Becadon Drive. I have lived in, then I purchased the one that I was never able to move into, which is the Omnipresent. Recently, I just inherited a house with an unexpected issue in the house that I've never dealt with before, which I'll be happy to tell you about, towards the end of the show if you want to talk about that one too. But so I've owned and or lived in a total of 3, and then the 4th one is one that haven't quite decided what to do with yet.
That's the one you inherited?
Yes.
And if you sell it, don't you have to disclose that it could be haunted?
No, actually not in the state of Louisiana, and you'd be surprised that a lot of them you don't have to. I would, because I did try to disclose it even in the very beginning with my Omnipresent book series.
How many people do you think, though, Lynn, would walk from the deal if you told them they're ready to make you an offer on the house, right? And you say, well, the place is haunted. Somebody was murdered there years ago or something. How many people do you think will go through and buy that house?
I would bet 80% of them would walk, unless, of course, they were looking for a haunted place, because I don't care what people say about, I don't believe in ghosts, or I don't this, or even if they have religious reasons that they feel that they're protected. Everybody has a little bit of knowledge or sensory that they feel that a lot of them dub out. We're all born as empaths. I believe we all have those gifts. But a lot of times the way that we're raised in our families or traditional religion kind of dub those things out, so people learn to ignore those types of gifts. But everybody still has a little bit of that questioning in there. So if you do mention that it's haunted, they either regress back to a moment back when they remember Aunt Agatha's rocker being pushed out into the chair in the middle of the night by itself, and any type of creepy moment that they've had as a childhood. And I think that most of them, if they didn't believe in paranormal, would walk. I really do.
I have a old house in St. Louis, and when my kids come over with their kids, they sometimes spend the night. And apparently a long, long, long time ago, it's a really old house, a dog was killed in the house by another dog that jumped through a door. It was a vicious animal. Jumped through a door, broke the glass, and came in and killed the other dog that was in the kitchen.
Oh, my God.
Now, I have not seen anything in the house for the years I've been here. But my kids have said that they sometimes see an image of a dog walking around the house. Now, isn't that weird?
It does happen. For me, it's not weird, because I see things like that frequently. So, and animals, they do sometimes linger, as well as some spirits do also, and animals do cross over as well as people do, so you do get to see your animals again. But, and children are very receptive to that, because when they're born, of course, they're wide open, and as they get older, the filters form that either block that sort of thing out, or if the family supports it and nurtures it, then they're able to keep it longer and to learn more things to add to it as they get older and embrace it. So I'm not surprised if you do have something in your house, the children would definitely be the ones to see it. And also older people that are getting closer to their time to pass would also mention seeing it, because as the filters are opened at birth through about age 5, they also, the filters start to efface on the flip side as a person gets closer to getting ready to cross back over.
Is that a barometer for somebody who doesn't even know they're going to be dying, that if they get this filter open, they might know something's coming up with them?
You know, a lot of times patients do know when their time is coming close, and they'll start talking about things such as, and give my dog to Mary Jo. Make sure that you take care of take care of my cats, or make sure that they'll definitely mention a place that they want them to go. I know my sister recently passed, and she was talking about where she wanted her birds and things placed, and it was unexpected that she passed. And people kind of do know. My mother actually had cancer, and she was in a facility, and she was going around the facility telling people, I'm going home tomorrow, meaning that she was going to cross over. And she did, in fact, cross over at one something the day after. But she even went to one woman and told her that she would watch the lady's dog, because the lady's dog had just passed away 3 days earlier. She had to put it down. And my mother told the woman, she said, I will take care of your dog on the other side until you can come and retrieve your dog. And sure enough, as I said, my mother did pass away the very next day. So they do. And as far as the medical field, from a medical standpoint, watching a patient kind of transition into that area, a lot of times they start seeing and talking about seeing loved ones or spirits in their rooms or in the hallways and things like that, even as much as a year in advance. So usually it's a pretty good indication for someone who has been working in end-of-life care. A lot of times the medical field calls it hallucinations. But the funny thing is that even though they're giving people medication for these hallucinations, they're still seeing the ghosts. They're seeing their loved ones coming in, the spirits, regardless of the medication, because they're not hallucinations. I have, for instance, of a blind lady that I would be happy to share with you if you like.
Yeah, please. Let's hear it.
Okay, I had a lady that I call Edna in my book, and she was totally blind. She'd been totally blind for 10 years, no shadows, nothing. She could see absolutely nothing. And she was on an active decline. She'd been placed on my unit, and I didn't know her that well. She'd only been there a couple of weeks, but her family came to the nurse's station, and they said to me, Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there. And I thought to myself, I knew to expect this, but of course I couldn't say that to them. And I'm like, well, let me walk down with you to your mom and see if there's something that she needs to make her more comfortable. So to comfort them more so than her, I walked with them down there because they wanted addressed. And she was laying at a slant, which most people usually are, laying at a slant, and she was reaching up into the air, actually trying to, it was like she was reaching for something very delicate, like something was being handed to her that was very, very fragile, like a snowflake.
Yeah.
Or something, and she was smiling. She was very pleased with what she was doing. And I asked her, I said, Edna, I said, who's here? And she said, George, and just so happened that her husband's name was George.
It wasn't me. Wasn't me.
No. And so the daughter immediately turned as white as a sheet, and she had to sit down, and she said, well, George is my father. And my father's been gone for X amount of years. And then Edna pipes up again, and she says, he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie. Well, Pixie was Edna's poodle. And when Edna's husband George passed away, the son had to take possession of Pixie because Edna, being blind, wasn't able to care for the dog. And the son was telling me the story, and he said, well, I have Pixie. Pixie at that point was like 15 years old, but still very much alive. And he said, well, do you think that my mom's hallucinating? And, of course, you just can't come out and say, no, I don't think your mom's hallucinating. I think that your deceased father is standing here in the room with you type thing. So I always turn it around. And I said to him, well, do you think that she's hallucinating? And he says, well, I don't know. And I said, well, do you mind if I try something? I said, I'm not trying to change your belief system. I'm not trying, anything to make you, think differently or feel uncomfortable. But would you mind if I try something? And he said no. And I said to Edna, Edna, can I ask George a question? And she nodded her head yes. And I said, George, what color is your son's shirt? Now, keep in mind that Edna can't see anything, nothing at all.
Right.
And Edna said yellow. And he was wearing a yellow Ralph Lauren polo shirt. And in that moment, the son got it. He's like, hi, Dad. He realized that the father was there. The thing about people when they're getting ready to transition is because those filters efface, they're able to hear the telepathy, which is how the spirit world communicates, is through telepathy. They're able to hear that through the filters that are effacing, as well as they can hear the embodied humans. And a lot of times they can convey messages. People don't realize that if a spirit is present in the room, which is important, they can ask a question to that spirit, and that spirit can answer through the person that is transitioning.
That is remarkable. Now
and not only that, talking about hallucinations, how can a blind person hallucinate? They can't see.
They can't see.
So how can that be a hallucination?
Of the houses you've owned or have been participating in, which one was the townhouse?
Okay, the townhouse is the new book that I have coming out. It's called 111 Beckedon Drive. I was in a position.
Is that number 3 or 4?
That was. I have 4 books out. This will be the 3rd book to the Omnipresent series, which will be book number 5 in a total writing that I've written so far.
Okay, and the 4th house that we were talking about that you inherited, that's not the townhouse.
No, and that's a book that I'm actually in the process of writing right now that'll be coming out next year.
Well, tell us about the townhouse now. What's going on there?
Okay, the townhouse, I was renting a house, trying to save up money to purchase a new home, and the townhouse, I was living in another place, and I had planned on staying there for several years, but the people decided to sell it. So, and of course, I did not want to buy that. I wanted to buy something different. So I ended up being put into a position where I had a very short time to find a place to move. And when I was notified, giving my 30 days notice that they were selling and that I needed to move, I was on vacation in Florida at the time. So I for a whole week. So by the time I got home, I had literally 14 days to find a place to move and still have that week left on the end to get out. So I started looking online. Everything, of course, was very expensive, and it was during the summer, towards the end of the summer months, so most of the places were taken. And I found this townhouse. There was a row of 10 townhouses side by side. And I never lived in a place that was connected like that before to understand how spirits work inside of an area, inside of like an apartment complex or homes like villas that are connected side by side. So I did a virtual viewing on it, and it was an older building that had been totally renovated, which, of course, any kind of renovations, if there are spirits in the house that are existing there, lost souls they can be called, or they're disembodied souls that maybe haven't crossed over, are usually the ones that are sleeping in the walls or that get disturbed with any kind of renovations.
Hold on for a second, Lynn. We'll have you finish the story when we come back. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Lynn Monet. Her website is her name, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Her latest book is called Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. She's working on other books as well, as she's been talking about. Lynn, let's go back to this townhouse. And it's difficult to clean a townhouse when it's connected to another building, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I had never experienced this before. And part of the reason for that is because the spirits can exit from a house while you're clearing it into the next door neighbor's house or even 10 houses down for that matter.
And then come back, right?
That's right. So it's kind of a game. It's like, oh, gee, well, they're here and they're doing this, so we'll just go 3 doors down until they're finished and come back. And yes, and that's the case. So normally, and in the case of this house being the 10 units of townhouses that were connected side by side, there was a resident ghost. There was actually more than one that didn't really want people there. When I found the place, because it was almost at the end of the 14 days, I contacted them to make an appointment to go and see it. I looked through it virtually. I didn't get to normally go in and I have a little routine that I do to go in, because even though I see spirits a lot of the time, most of them, even in the home that I'm living now, they just are crossing through. So it's not an issue. There's nothing stuck. But I still go in prepared to look for anything that is stuck, because, of course, I don't want to be there with something stuck.
Sure.
Or I know that I need to go in and try to remove it, which in the case of some cases, which I just found out with this fourth house, sometimes things can't be removed. So, because they're different, but I'll tell you a little bit more.
Well, Lynn, how do we know that these entities aren't following you wherever you go?
You know, that is a good question. I'm sure that I do have a lot of them that do follow me, but the reason why I think that these particular ones are not following, because I'm sure that I do have guides and special, even, my family members and things from the other side that do come around close. They can be 6 places simultaneously at one time, and a lot of things that I have for my protection. Because the spirits, when they are disembodied souls, they still resemble what they looked like when they were in human form, and these appear different each time. So in the case of this building, when I had gone to see the house finally, it was on the day that I was supposed to meet with the manager to sign the lease. I had already been approved. I had already done everything, but I didn't get a chance to really go through and feel the building. And of course, the ghosts, they're curious, but they will exit, and they usually wait about 24 hours to 40 hours before they start showing themselves.
Mm-hmm. They hold back, don't they?
Yes, they do. They're sneaky. So, and plus, they're not used to people being able to see them. So, I have a tendency when I go in, I guess I'm kind of like a light bulb going in, so a lot of times I will attract things. But in this case, I didn't have a lot of time to go in sensory. It was, I'm meeting her there. I see that it's a decent place. It's in my price range. I have 1 week to get my stuff out of the other place and moved into this place. So I went ahead and I signed. And I noticed that the townhouse, even though it had been newly renovated, that it still kind of needed to be cleaned. I mean, it looked like the people that had moved out, that they hadn't cleaned the bathrooms or the appliances and stuff.
They just left. They just left.
They just left. And so I asked the agent, I said, when is this going to be cleaned so I can actually start moving my stuff in? And she assured me that afternoon that they would have a cleaning crew come in and that they would clean it. And I'm like, okay, well, great. I'll continue to pack. I'll start bringing my stuff over and tomorrow or whatever. And so the next day I go over, and I've got my van stuffed with boxes, and I'm getting ready to carry them in, and I'm putting them on the carpeted areas. But then when I go into the kitchen, I notice that the stove is still dirty. The refrigerator hasn't been cleaned. There are even dirty dishes left inside of the dishwasher.
Oh, I hate that.
There before, yeah. So then I went up to the bathroom, and even their toiletries were still in the drawers, and it looked like somebody had put cleaner on the toilet but had not wiped it off, kind of thing. So I called the management company, and I said, look,
Did these people flee quickly?
It sounded like it. So I mentioned to the management company, and that's when I found out that even though the place had newly been renovated and supposedly I was the first one there was actually a couple that had stayed there for a couple of months before me and then left. And that's why it looked like somebody had kind of been living there when it should have looked more like brand new.
Might they have seen the haunting and got scared and just got out of there?
I come to find out that the whole building was haunted, and once I got moved in there and started talking with other people were reluctant, but they were coming forward with experiences, and some of them were terrified.
Well, what did the cleaning lady tell you? There was a story about that.
Yes. When I was driving over, because the house wasn't cleaned, they finally got in touch with the cleaning lady. The cleaning lady called me to set up a time, and she literally told me on the phone, and she said, I am so, so sorry that I did not finish cleaning your townhouse. And she said, I need to warn you of something.
Oh, boy,
said,
here we go.
Yep. She says, here, I've already signed on the lease. So I'm like, and also just to back up a little bit, while I was waiting for them to come that day, when I went back the second day with my boxes, I did unload them into the house, but I wasn't planning on using any of the things until they were cleaned. So while I'm in the master bedroom of this townhouse, out of my peripheral vision, I see this little girl. It was a ghost of a little girl standing in the doorway watching me put away my clothes in the closet and shoes. And she was a beautiful little girl. So anyway, when the maid contacted me and she said to me that she needed to warn me of something, and she said to me, she said, I know that this is going to sound weird and you're probably going to think that I'm crazy, but do not move into that apartment.
Oh. Did she tell you why?
Yes. She said, I know, she said, I know that this sounds crazy, she said, but that place is haunted. She said, the whole building, but especially the one that you are moving into and the one next door to yours is the worst.
So what did you end up doing, Lynn?
Well, of course, I called the management company. And the thing was, too, is when I went through the house with the agent, I just want to back up a little bit, and I went to sign the lease just on a whim. I said to the agent, I said, if this house turns out to be haunted, will that break my lease? I want to know that will break my lease and that I can move. And she said, she looked at me funny, and she's like, really haunted? I said, yes. I purchased a haunted house previously that was so badly haunted. I wrote a book about it, and I was never able to move in there. I said I had to turn around and sell it. I said, so I want to make sure that this time, because I'm going to be stuck living here. I don't have time to look for any place else to go. I want to make sure that if I move in here and there's some issue with ghosts in this house, that I have an option to leave. And she kind of chuckled, and she says, well, yeah, we work with people if they have to move out early. So after speaking to the maid and after her telling me about my apartment in particularly, I called the management company, and I said to them, you're aware that this building is haunted, because the maid told me, because I asked her, I said, did you mention to management about the fact that this
and the maid was not somebody you hired. They hired her, right?
Yes, they hired her, and she said yes, that she had mentioned it, and that they always would kind of laugh at her because she was an empath and had sensory gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I called them, I told them, I said, I need to get my money back and break my lease. I mean, at that point, I was going to go put my stuff in storage and stay in a hotel or a friend's house until I could find someplace else to go. And, of course, they told me that a haunting, they laughed at me. They said a haunting is not grounds for breaking your lease. And I said, well, according to the agent, it is. And they said, well, that agent no longer works here.
And it wasn't in writing, right?
Well, and it wasn't in writing because of, it was something that I had mentioned to her. And so anyway, and plus, how do you have proof of that? So, of course, they told me that the agent wasn't working there any longer. And then 2 weeks later, the management company changed. And talking to the neighbors, not only did the neighbors switch out frequently, but the management companies, like in the past year, they had 4 different management companies come through there so that nobody could remember what the previous one said and was responsible, to follow through with whatever that was. So I ended up getting stuck living there. And the place immediately next door to me that was also supposed to be the worst one that was haunted was empty at the time. They were doing renovations on that. I did end up meeting the people that ended up moving in there who were talking, who would come out and they would smoke their cigarettes because they weren't allowed to smoke inside. They would come out and sit by the front door, and they'd smoke their cigarettes. And I kind of built up a rapport with them. And so I made mention of the ghost in the house. And because they were asking, I had my partner Bill come and help clear out the apartment. We finally found a way to seal off, because when you have something that's connected, even though you clear it and neutralize the negativity and possibly even get the spirits out or any whatever else could be in there, you have to be able to seal off the perimeters of your living space so that nothing can come back through, back into the space. And we actually found a way to do that, but it made it worse in everybody else's apartments. So I was speaking to the people that live next door, and I made mention about the sign. There was a sign that was for rent that was posted in front of the buildings, of course, and somebody had taken a black marker and wrote "haunted" on the for rent sign for the whole building. And I looked at it, and my neighbor was sitting there, and I said, "Oh, wow, look at that." I said, somebody actually wrote "haunted" on the for rent sign. And he looked at me, and he said, "Yeah." He says, "There's some weird things that have been going on in my place." And I said, "Really?" And I kind of told him about what I had experienced, about the some of the things that the maid had told me when she did call me. She did mention the little girl, and I said, "Well, I've seen her." I said, "But I know how to get her out. I can cross her over. That part's not a problem." And she said, "No, it's not her that's the problem. It's the mumbling man in the bathroom." Well, it just so happened when I was putting my things away in the kitchen there, I kept hearing this mumbling. But the window of the kitchen was to the front of the building where the parking area was, and there were people always walking up and down the sidewalk or pulling in with their cars or walking past exercising. So I thought that it was maybe somebody talking on their phone kind of low. I didn't realize it until she mentioned the mumbling man. And there was this creepy tall man in there that I actually got a picture of, and I actually sent it. Your guys have it, but it was not appropriate to post it because this particular spirit was not wearing clothes. So, yeah, and this spirit would go from townhouse to townhouse, tapping on people's nightstands, pulling off their covers. He would disturb women in their sleep. In particularly, it didn't matter if it was male or female, because even in the case my son was living in the house with us too, would fluff his hair. It got to the point where he would tell them to leave him alone, and then they'd start tapping on the nightstand. I had them tapping on my nightstand.
Was this somebody who may have died there, Lynn, some time ago?
You know, by the way that the man appeared, he appeared to be like an old farmer type person.
Now, what's an old farmer doing in a relatively new townhouse?
Well, this was an older building, but, you know, it's not about the house. It's about the age of the ground that it's built on, and you don't know what was there before. And a lot of these spirits, Indian spirits and spirits like that, are stuck there from centuries ago because of whatever is related to the ground.
Or what if it was built over a cemetery?
Oh, my goodness, yes, exactly. Or a burial, or an Indian burial ground. Definitely. You know, you just never, even a brand new house can be haunted if it's built in the wrong place.
Sure. Have you been able to clear every house you work in?
You know, this is where we're coming into the fourth house. No, I have not. I recently ran into an issue, as I had made mention. My sister unexpectedly passed away recently, and I inherited her house. So in Louisiana, so I had been going to the house, and of course, when somebody passes away, there is a heavier flow of spirits, but it's more so spirits that are coming from the other side that have crossed over, like relatives and things like that. You'll see. I saw my father, my sister, of course, presented in her home a couple of times, but there was this other issue in the house, that there was also this being that was changing shape, there was shift changing. And I noticed one time I was sitting in the living room, and it looked like my father presented, but it didn't have the feel. And he was in these ugly golf pants that he used to wear, and this shirt. And I thought to myself, why on earth would you be wearing that on the other side? That was so ugly, even in this lifetime.
It's ugly this time. Why make it worse on the other side,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Why would you wear something like that? And of course, I was upstairs then in my sister's room, and I noticed that there was a picture of my dad exactly in that outfit. So because even seeing her present in the house, the feeling was off. It didn't feel like her, so I knew that something was shift-changing. And so I thought, okay, well, we have a ghost in the house as a trickster, maybe a low-level poltergeist or something like that. And I didn't feel any demonic activity, and people sometimes confuse poltergeist with demons, and they are different. So I contacted some people and to see if I could get somebody to come and help me clear it, and of course no people were available. So when my son came, we went through bells and whistles, not literally bells and whistles, but we did our ritual to absolutely blast it out of the house, and it didn't work. My son and I are in the house upstairs, and all of a sudden we see this thing that's about under 3 feet tall, say maybe 2.5 to 3 feet tall, walk past both of us. And my son says, well, Hogwarts just passed by. And I said, you saw that? I said, yeah, it does look like Hogwarts. It looks like the little banker on Harry Potter, the Hogwarts, with the nose and the little short, stubby body walking past. And then it came back past us the opposite direction, heading towards the third bedroom. And I said, yeah, he just passed by again. He said, yeah, I know, I saw him. Then the little thing comes back a third time, but this time there's ectoplasm forming in the hallway where he left, and there are these faces.
Well, let's talk about this little thing when we come back, Lynn, then we'll take phone calls too.